So a little about me. I have done well over $500 million real estate transactions. Wrote a book called Creative Real Estate Investing before ChatGTP came out. So it was the number one bestseller there on Amazon for several weeks. So I get into many different type of seller financing strategies. The big one out there that everybody's talking about in today's environment is subject to. That's one type of seller financing strategy. Then you have an agreement for deed, lease options, sandwich lease options, novation. There's so many different types of creative seller financing strategies. And then once you've been in it long enough, you end up figuring out and coming up with your own type of strategies as well. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about like how to find deals that where sellers will be open to a creative seller financing strategy. And most of all is how to have those conversations. That's where being in the business for so long, that's where it really comes down to is that art is understanding and having those conversations with sellers so they end up doing a creative seller financing deal. Most investors will just go into it, talk about the numbers, and just go right into it, but it's so much more than that, and it's very majority of it is psychological. And the key to it when you're talking to a seller, when you're doing creative seller financing strategies, just remember this is the number one thing, because the rest of the stuff, once you understand all the strategies and how to structure it, it's repetition. Once you've done a few of them, it becomes easier. But the key to it, the real big key to it, is when you're talking to sellers, you have to treat it that it's like a marriage. Think of it the first time you went with and you met your significant other. The first time you guys sat down, you got to know each other. 80% of my phone call is getting to know the seller, understanding them, who they are, what's the most important, and I want them to know me. So that's how the art is really how you get the creative seller financing strategy deals is understanding and listening to the sellers. And the reason why they're going to do it is because they like you. They're getting bombarded by all these other people out there calling them, the realtors, everybody getting bombarded about the creative seller financing subject to all that type of stuff. So that's what they're really getting bombarded. I've been doing this for years. I've done well over 3,000 single families. And we're going to talk about DealMachine in a minute because that's one of the great sources where I love to find deals is through DealMachine. I've built up over 600 bird dogs that referred me deals throughout the years, and it's taken me time. For those that don't know what a bird dog is, it's a referral source. For example, like trashmen, they work the neighborhood. They know what homes are sitting empty. So I have a whole entire system set up where they have the app. They take a screenshot, text it to a number, it goes to my VA. Trashmen, landscapers, snowplow removals, pest control, um, Uber drivers, Amazon drivers, um, cleaning people, nannies. I built up such a variety where I get my best and my home run deals are through hospice nurses. I get great deals from them because they're just referrals. And then I really love what I call tired landlords. I love those because you don't have they don't want to get hit with capital gains, and that's where DealMachine really comes in. And I got to say, I've used PropStream, I've used all these other ones. DealMachine is really out there, much further, and I really like it because they do the skip tracing and they have the LLCs. That's what I really, really like about DealMachine. And if you guys ever worked in any other systems like PropStream or any of those, you have to pay extra on top of it, and then they don't even do the LLCs. Then you have to have a VA. So this really speeds up the process. So I like pulling tired landlords, people that have owned a property for 12, 15 years plus. Just reach out to them. They're really good because they've been in a situation where you're at. They wanted to build a portfolio. Now they're to a point where they like that passive income, but they don't want all the headaches, if you will, and they won't get hit with capital gains, and they're not so greedy. So a good tip here is if you're working a deal and you're talking to a seller and it's another investor, and if they own that property for 5 years or less, typically there's no meat left on the bone for you because they're trying to sell it and rolling it into the next deal. So keep that in mind, unless they're financially stressed and they were doing a fix and flip and they got overhead. But a lot of times those deals are really hard to work because otherwise they would refinance it out and they can't refinance it because of the interest rates and it's not taking care of itself. So just keep that in mind. But let's kind of back up a little bit because when you're talking to sellers and trying to find sellers that are open to seller financing, I always recommend people first start jumping onto like Zillow for sale by owner. find your buy box, what you're looking for. For me, my buy box is whatever the median price range for that area is. I like to go 20% above and 20% below. For an example, let's say it's 250,000. So my max is going to be 300 and my low is going to be 200. I will look at things under 200, but majority of the time it's going to be in a war zone, but it could be a property that might be in a nice area that just needs some fixing. The reason why I like to say 20% is because that's mainly where your pool is, where your buyers are going to be, or your tenants, or whatever your exit strategy, what you're trying to do. Because I can't tell you how many times I get a property or I've seen sellers like, the median price range is 200,000 and they want to sell their home for 475,000. Oh yeah, I'll do seller financing, but it's going to be hard for you to find your buyer. So keep that in mind. That's why I like that. And then also the minimum population. For me, it's about 20,000. You can also get easy, you can get seller financing, creative seller financing in rural areas, but you're going to have a hard time finding properties or finding a buyer for that. So those are kind of some of the things that I look for. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to give you a couple examples of how I structure a seller financing deal. And majority of my deals, I do with zero down or to very little down. And I see a lot of guys out there wholesaling these deals, and there's nothing wrong with wholesaling. I think it's great. But if you do your deal and you negotiate correctly, you can make just as much money on the front end as you do wholesaling and stay in the middle and cash flow and then get your money on the back end. I had one of my people that I was working with, she had a deal, it was a subject to deal in Texas. And this property needed roughly about $37,000 worth of work. And she didn't have the capital because she was doing a fix and flip. So she was going to wholesale it. She was going to do an assignment. I'm like, okay, let's look at the deal. How much are you going to ask for the assignment fee? She goes, I'm going to ask $15,000 for it. Okay. I said, when it's all said and done, realistically, what are you going to get for that deal? She said, I don't know, $8,000 to $10,000. That's typically where most of them fall in. They try to get more, but so we went through the deal, we analyzed it, we underwrote it. For her staying in that deal over 5 years, she was making $171,000 instead of like the $8,000 to $10,000 on the front end. You can do 5 deals a year, make just as much as wholesaling doing 10 deals a month. It's so because the way you're setting your spreads up. So what we did in this case is, okay, it needed $37,000 worth of work or 35 somewhere in that area. And the seller was behind about a month and a half. So that's easy, just bringing the mortgage current. We're going to get into it. So what we did is we went out there and we market the property as a home improvement, like a handyman special type of thing, a handyman special. So when the calls come in, we sit there and tell the buyer, hey, you know what, we're going to fix this up. But if we're fixing this up, we're going to be looking for $60,000, $70,000 down. But if you're handy and you want to do all this work yourself, well, instead of that, asking that large down payment, we'll take $15,000 or $18,000 down. So she ended up finding a buyer that was handy. They put $15,000 down, and she was going to make 700. She made $775 a month almost cash flow off that deal, and then she was going to make another 90 something on the back end when they pay that off in 5 years. Because typically, if you're waiting for your capital, you're selling it as a premium. So she's made just as much money on the front end on that deal and still cash flowing because she understood the exit and how to understand the different strategies on exiting. But that's just one example when you're doing a creative seller financing strategy. And then subject to is, most people here know what a subject to is because it's a buzzword, is you're keeping the mortgage in the seller's name and you're transferring the deed over to you. For me, because I know so many other strategies, if I know the seller's not financial distress and they're not in a bad situation, they move. I never, ever, ever will pitch a subject to. People are always pitching subject to. We pitch an alternative strategy. You're still accomplishing the same thing, agreement for deed and and we end up getting the deals majority of the time because other people are pitching a subject to, and we're like, why would you do something like that? You still can do other strategies and still lock it up. But I had somebody that I was working with that's no real estate experience. In under 35 days, he ended up doing his first deal because he was going head with somebody else doing that type of strategy. So that's just me. I would never pitch a subject to if they're not financial stressed, but I can still take it down with another creative seller financing strategy. And once you start understanding the different strategies, it's easier and you listen to the seller. For me, I think of a tool belt. Depending on the seller's needs, that will determine that tool, and the tool will be a strategy, like a subject to, an agreement for deed, land contract, installment sale, sandwich lease option. So those are the different type of other strategies that I'll end up doing. Now, I've been in this business a long time, and it's taken me probably 2 to 3 years to kind of really understand all these different type of strategies. But now I think of it as a tool belt, and depending on the seller's needs, listening to the seller, that will determine. So I'm going to give you an example. Whenever somebody's bringing a deal to me and I want to look at it, I always want to know two things. Number one, why are they selling and what are they planning on doing with the capital? Because if you can understand those two things and be creative enough, that's how you can solve the seller's problems and solutions. I'll give you an example. We had a gentleman in Georgia, and it was in springtime, and he's open to seller financing. He wanted $30,000 down, but he wanted $120,000 for this home. It does not make sense putting $30,000 down on a $128,000 home. But I already knew what the issue was, just that down payment. But I still got on the phone with him. I started talking to him. I built a really good rapport with him. I found out his most important thing at that moment was his dog in his life. He has 5 children. He has grandchildren. He's a huge Atlanta Falcons football fan. He found out my team and everything. I found out that he's retired. He banks with a credit union. He's got good credit, and his wife passed away. So as I'm getting to know him, he's getting to know me as well. So his name is Robert. I go, hey, Robert, what are you planning on doing with that $30,000? He goes, oh, I need $25,000 for a camper, and then I wanted some spending money. I go, a camper? I go, where are you planning on going with camping? He goes, oh, I'm going to go to West Virginia and the New River, and then I'm going to go into Virginia and Shenandoah Mountains, then into Tennessee and Ohio. Then what I did is I kind of took him on a little journey. I'm going to ask you guys, just think of the last time you guys that you've been camping. Then who were you with? Were you with family, friends? Were you on the river or a lake? What activities did you do? Did you swim, kayak, paddleboard, hiking? What kind of food did you have? Just think of yourself at this. What kind of food did you have at this event? Spending the night, waking up in the morning and having that cup of coffee, and it's feeling that nice, cool, crisp, and it's beautiful. So I'm asking him these questions. So he's visualizing what his life's like once that property's gone. So he's understanding, okay, he's becoming emotional. So he wants to kind of go back to that whole situation. So his family, his friends, so I'm asking those questions and really diving deep. And then when he goes into another area, what's he going to be doing there? Is there going to be more people? So I spend a little time on that. Then I go back to him. I go, hey, Robert, I know you've been trying to sell this property for 2 months and you open a seller finance. I go, what seems to be the problem? He goes, everybody's beating me up in a down payment. That's kind of what they're coming at. They're beating me up in a down payment, this and that. I go, well, how many offers you had? He goes, I've had probably about 12 to 15 offers from investors. So I already knew the issue was the down payment. I go, Robert, I'm going to be frank with you. Nobody is going to put $30,000 down on a home when they can go get an investor loan, less capital down, because they can find a different property that's a little bit more desirable. But this is what I'll do. I will give you $3,500 down. You mentioned that you bank with a credit union. Go ahead and take a loan out at the credit union for the camper for the $25,000. And what I'll do is on the 20th of every month, we'll automatically have the payments pulled directly out of our account and sent directly to the credit union and make the payment on your behalf. And then what we'll do is in the portal for your credit union, we're going to create a Gmail for that particular address. So whenever there's a notice or a payment or anything goes out, you'll get forwarded a copy of it, and my bookkeeper will get a copy of it. So we're all on the same page. We got that deal for $3,500 down. And then what we did is we went and sold it on a lease option to our end buyer, and our end buyer put $18,000 down. So out of the $18,000, we ended up giving the seller his $3,500, the payment on that, and we're cash flowing, even paying the camper, we're cash flowing $475 a month on that. Because I listened to the seller, built a rapport with him, found out what his issue was, and how I can come up with a solution. That is the key when you want to do these creative seller financing. The rest of it, once you understand, going through structuring the deal, whatever spreadsheet, whatever analysis you've used in chat, all that is the same type of agreement and same process. Sometimes they're a little different depending on the strategies, like if you're going to do an agreement for deed, land contract, or subject to. There's different ways. But if you can understand that art of it, that's how you get all these type of deals, is building that rapport. And I'm sure some of you guys on here do that and have that talent and really go into it. But slow down and get to know the seller. And then the other thing, this is really, really, really key is, and that's why it's good to use like DealMachine and have a good CRM and everything. Majority of the time when you pitch somebody and seller financing strategy, they're going to turn you down. they're going to still trying to sell it the other way. 70% of my deals come from follow-up where I pitched. So you want to make sure you have a really good follow-up system. I have mine every 45 to 60 days, somewhere in there does a follow-up text. Hey, whatever. I had a deal that I pitched 18 months ago and they came back around because they're trying to do their own thing. And then they get to a point where they're motivated and they need some help on that. So that's kind of how that tends to go through that process.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.